The night was silent, yet the silence carried a warning. In the capital city of Ouagadougou, rain fell in thin silver sheets, dripping onto empty roads lit only by flickering lamps. But beneath that quiet surface, a secret was unfolding, one that threatened to erase more than 800 human lives in less than 2 days. Infants were packed into steel containers like cargo. Pregnant women were drugged and tagged like cattle. Children's bodies were already marked for organs before they even reached puberty. This was not a nightmare. It was real, and it was happening in the heart of Africa. Then came a single call. It revealed the unthinkable. A $500 million CFA trafficking empire was about to vanish without a trace. And someone inside the government knew. At that moment, Captain Ibrahim Traoré gave an order that would change everything. Lock the files. Trust no one. We moved tonight. What followed was not just another operation. It was the most dangerous raid of his life. A 48-hour race against betrayal, sandstorms, and gunfire, because if they failed, human life itself would become a currency no African leader could ever afford to ignore again. My friends, this is not simply the story of soldiers breaching doors or chasing convoys through the Sahel. This is the story of a continent asking itself, can Africa rise if its children are being sold in silence? Can a nation as small and fragile as Burkina Faso confront one of the largest trafficking networks in the world and win? Where are you watching from today? Let us know in the comments below. And if this story matters to you, if you believe the truth must shine brighter than the darkness, please subscribe, share, and stand with us. Because tonight, as the clock ticks, it is not just Burkina Faso's fight, it is humanity's. The call came just after midnight. On the other end of the line was not a politician, not a journalist, but a frightened informant who had risked everything to speak. His voice was trembling, but the words were sharp enough to pierce steel. They're moving tonight. More than 800 people. If you don't act, they will vanish forever. Within minutes, Captain Ibrahim Traoré was in the operations room. The air was thick, not with smoke, but with fear. A large military map stretched across the steel table. Dozens of red pins marked the Sahel, each one a place where children had disappeared. These weren't just coordinates, they were lives. Mothers still searching, fathers still praying, villages left in silence. The intelligence officer laid down a brown folder. Inside were images no human should ever have to see: satellite shots of convoys moving through the desert, cages hidden beneath tarps, heat signatures of dozens packed inside containers. The analyst's voice cracked as he explained, this isn't just trafficking, they are harvesting organs, infants, pre-teens, gone within hours. The room fell silent. Some of the men lowered their heads, others clenched their fists. But Traoré did not flinch. He had seen enough red dots on maps, enough whispered names of missing children. Now those whispers demanded action. Then came the revelation that shook even his most loyal commanders. Some names on the leaked finance logs matched officials inside the Burkina Faso security services, active officers, men who wore the same uniform, saluted the same flag. The betrayal was cutting the nation from within. One officer broke the silence. If they are in our ranks, they already know we're coming. Captain Traoré's response was firm. From now, everything goes dark. No phone calls, no leaks. Encrypt all files. We move face-to-face only. If anyone betrays us, even if he wears medals, he will be arrested like the rest. At 4:13 in the morning, 5 armored vehicles rolled out of Ouagadougou into the desert. No headlights, only the pulse of infrared guiding them through scrubland toward the Mali border. The mission was codenamed Operation Falcon, and the target was a warehouse disguised as a storage depot. The rain had dried to dust, but the tension had not. Inside the lead vehicle, Captain Traoré sat silently, his hand resting on his rifle. He had read the dossier 3 times. One chance, one shot. If they failed, hundreds of lives would disappear before sunrise. The signal came from above. One blink from the overhead drone, then all 5 vehicles stopped in perfect synchrony. Before them stood the warehouse, corrugated steel, 2 stories high, tucked into the slope of barren land. From the outside, it looked lifeless, but the heat map showed otherwise: too many warm bodies, too clustered for any storage facility. Traoré raised his fist. The soldiers fanned out 2 units to the left, 2 to the right, one holding the rear perimeter. Flashbangs were readied but silenced. Bolt cutters hissed against steel, and then the first door cracked open. What they saw inside was worse than anyone imagined. Rows of shipping containers lined the floor like silent tombs. From within came muffled knocks, faint coughing, the fragile cry of a child. A soldier whispered, "Over here." Locks snapped one by one. When the first container opened, the stench struck first sweat, blood, despair, then the sight. Dozens of people crammed together, women clutching infants, children no older than 7, old men barely conscious. One girl had raw bleeding marks around her ankles. A boy whispered, voice shaking like paper, "Don't let them take me again, please." The soldiers moved quickly. Triage teams handed out water, glucose shots, blankets. Some victims collapsed the moment they tasted relief. Others clung desperately to the uniforms of men they had never met, soldiers who had suddenly become their last hope. But time was already slipping away, and somewhere in the dark, enemies were watching. The first shots cracked through the night without warning. Bullets ricocheted off the steel walls of the warehouse as shadows moved swiftly from the northeast perimeter. Armed men, faces covered with scarves, rifles mounted with night sights, advanced with precision. They did not scream, they did not rush, they fired with the cold discipline of soldiers who had done this before. Inside the warehouse, panic erupted. Children screamed, women tried to shield infants with their bodies, and the newly freed survivors pressed against the back walls in terror. The rescue had just turned into a battlefield. Captain Ibrahim Traoré did not retreat. He signaled forward with his hand, his voice steady even amid chaos. "Push them out. Contain the breach." His men surged toward the incoming fire, moving between crates and concrete pillars. One soldier took a round in the thigh, another was grazed across the arm, but the line held. The attackers threw smoke grenades, turning the warehouse into a choking fog. But Traoré had anticipated this. He moved with precision, flanking right, catching 2 militants unaware. With a single controlled burst from his rifle, he cut them down. "Suppress left. Move forward," he commanded. The soldiers obeyed, momentum shifting. Within 3 minutes, the warehouse exterior was secured. 2 attackers captured 3 dead, one escaping into the scrub. What they carried revealed a darker truth. Among the captured, one had a portable, encrypted terminal, military-grade, manufactured in Europe. Spanish or German build, the tech analyst confirmed. This was no local militia. These men were part of a larger machine, one with international sponsors. Then came the convoy. At 12 hours, intelligence drones spotted 4 vehicles fleeing north along the ridges. Traoré ordered an immediate intercept. 2 helicopters roared into the dusk sky as armored vehicles gave chase on the ground. The fleeing convoy did not scatter. It moved with discipline like a unit drilled for this scenario. One truck peeled off another, slowed deliberately, a classic diversion. But Traoré didn't fall for it. "Stay on the lead." That's the one he barked, and he was right. Within minutes, the lead vehicle spun off the road under heavy fire, slamming against a boulder. Its side door burst open. A tall man in a dark jacket stepped out, calmly carrying a briefcase. He did not run, did not resist. Instead, he smiled when his eyes met Traoré's. "You're late," he said. Traoré's reply was cold. "You're finished." This was the gatekeeper, the shadow architect of the trafficking empire. Inside his briefcase, investigators found 2 encrypted hard drives labeled South Root and Client Ledger. Each was biometric locked, but alongside them was a handwritten code string and one name underlined twice, Guarded Alumbra, a man fluent in 4 languages, trained in Europe, and long suspected of managing the Trans-Sahel slave corridors. But just as the team connected the drives to their systems, a purge began. Files vanished in real time, 40% already gone. The gatekeeper laughed. "By now, Lagos, Tripoli, Marseille. All the links are burning. You've lost." Yet hope sparked where arrogance thought it had triumphed. One young analyst raised his voice. "I cloned the packets as they moved. We mirrored everything." Gasps filled the command room. They had it all: transaction logs, account numbers, government IDs, even recipient accounts hidden in Panama. The gatekeeper's eyes dropped for the first time. He realized he had underestimated his hunters. "You thought you were a ghost," Traoré said, staring him down. "Turns out even shadows leave footprints." News of the raid spread like wildfire. Across Burkina Faso, families who had lost children clung to hope for the first time in years. Crowds gathered outside army barracks, chanting Traoré's name, praying for the safe return of the rescued. On social media, images of children wrapped in blankets flooded timelines, sparking outrage and solidarity. The African Union released a midnight statement of support calling the raid a model for continental action. Niger's president demanded a joint Pan-African tribunal. Ghana pledged to host a summit on trafficking within 30 days. In Dakar, hundreds protested outside the EU liaison office, waving banners, "No more blood trade, no more lies." The battle in the desert had become a storm across the continent, and for the first time in decades, Africa was not waiting for the West to speak, it was speaking for itself. The dust of battle had barely settled when the full weight of the operation began to reveal itself. By the end of the 48 hours, the tally was staggering: 832 souls rescued. Among them were 427 children, many too young to speak. More than 320 women, including 21 pregnant, and 85 men who had been forced into unpaid labor. Some had been transported across 4 countries, moved like chess pieces in a game they never chose to play. Medical teams worked around the clock. Dehydration, infections, malnutrition, some of the victims collapsed the moment sunlight hit their faces. One doctor whispered to a reporter, "Some of these children haven't seen the sky in weeks." But beyond the human toll came the political shockwave. Several detainees were paraded before the cameras. Among them, 2 senior intelligence officers from Burkina Faso's own security division, a former deputy minister of trade, and a contractor linked to a private military company in Côte d'Ivoire. One man tried to hide his face, but the press recognized him instantly. He had once stood proudly behind President Alassane Ouattara during a United Nations speech. Now he stood handcuffed, his head bowed in disgrace. For ordinary Burkinabe citizens, the revelation was devastating. The same leaders sworn to protect them had been feeding their children into the hands of traffickers. Trust in the state, already fragile, was shaken to its core. And yet alongside the anger, there was pride. For the first time, their country had not bowed, had not hidden the truth. Captain Ibrahim Traoré had exposed the rot for the world to see. Internationally, the fallout was immediate. Digital evidence over 300 gigabytes was placed in sealed crates and flown under guard to The Hague. The International Criminal Court confirmed it had opened a case under Article 7 of the Rome Statute, Crimes Against Humanity. The files contained more than numbers, blood tests, biometric scans, forged documents, and testimonies of survivors who had learned to speak only in silence. African leaders could no longer deny the scale of the horror. Ghana pledged new cyber forensic units to track cross-border trafficking. Niger's president called for a continental intelligence-sharing pact. Civil society organizations across West Africa rallied, demanding not only punishment for the guilty, but systemic reform to prevent such networks from ever rising again. Inside Burkina Faso, the public response was profound. In mosques, churches, and village squares, prayers were held for the rescued. Women's associations launched fundraising drives to provide food and shelter. University students marched through Ouagadougou chanting, "Never again, never again." Yet the questions ran deeper. How could medical-grade tracking implants manufactured in Israel find their way into rural trafficking rings? How had NGO seals from Malta and financial transfers through France and Canada passed unnoticed? Was this simply crime, or had the machinery of global power been complicit all along? Traoré's government answered with firmness. He stood before the press not with a speech prepared by advisors, but with the raw conviction of a soldier. "No man, woman, or child will be sold while I draw breath. Not here, not anywhere." His words ignited both hope and unease. For many Africans, he had become more than a captain. He was a sentinel. But for entrenched elites and foreign interests, he was now the most dangerous man in West Africa. The consequences of Operation Falcon went far beyond the battlefield. It had struck at the very architecture of impunity, proving that traffickers, no matter how protected, could be exposed. It had also laid bare the deepest wound of the nation: betrayal from within. And it left a haunting question for the continent: can Africa build a future of sovereignty if its own guardians can be bought? While Burkina Faso reeled from the shock, the ripples reached far beyond its borders. In New York, Washington, Brussels, and Geneva, diplomats scrambled to respond. The images of children pulled from shipping containers, their eyes wide with fear, had already gone viral. Silence was no longer an option, yet the tone was uneven. The African Union quickly declared Operation Falcon a continental milestone, urging other states to replicate its model. Ghana offered to host a special summit on trafficking, while Niger proposed a joint Pan-African tribunal to prosecute crimes against humanity. In Dakar, protesters outside the European Union liaison office waved banners reading "No more blood trade, no more lies." Europe's reaction was defensive. French and German officials condemned the trafficking, but avoided mention of the European-made encrypted devices found on captured militants. Malta's government denied involvement after its NGO seals were exposed on falsified documents. Canadian business councils quietly cut ties with logistics firms named in the seized ledgers. The United States, however, walked a fine line. On one hand, Washington praised Burkina Faso's bravery. On the other, it raised concerns about due process and judicial standards in handling suspects. For many Africans, this rang hollow. Where were these concerns when Western companies profited from the very trade now exposed? Where was Washington's outrage when medical-grade tracking implants produced in Israel were found in the backs of trafficked children? American media added to the confusion. Some outlets framed Traore as a hero of human rights. Others painted him as a populist strongman, warning that centralizing power around a military figure could destabilize the region. The narrative split revealed a deeper question: was the West more unsettled by the trafficking empire's collapse, or by the rise of an African leader unwilling to play by its rules? Meanwhile, in the global South, the reaction was different. Leaders from Latin America and Asia sent messages of solidarity, recognizing in Traoré's struggle a reflection of their own battles against cartels and transnational exploitation. In churches across the Caribbean and among African diaspora communities in the United States, his image standing among rescued children circulated with a single phrase: Africa Rise. The geopolitical implications were unmistakable. Operation Falcon had not only dismantled a trafficking empire, it had forced the world to confront its complicity. If a small landlocked nation like Burkina Faso could bring an international crime network to its knees, what excuse did larger powers have for their silence? And so the question now echoed from Ouagadougou to Washington. Does the world truly care about African lives or only about African resources? As dawn broke over the Sahel, the last container was opened. Inside, children blinked into the sunlight, their eyes squinting at a world they hadn't seen in weeks. Some reached for the hands of soldiers they didn't know but somehow trusted. Others clutched blankets, silent, too exhausted even to cry. And in that fragile silence, Captain Ibrahim Traoré spoke the words that would define the operation. This is not a war against crime. It is a war for dignity. Those words cut deeper than any bullet. Because what Operation Falcon revealed was not just a trafficking empire, it revealed the cracks in our world. It showed us how human life could be reduced to cargo, how governments could turn away, how silence could be weaponized. For Burkina Faso, the message was clear. Sovereignty is not only about borders or resources, it is about protecting the very soul of the nation, its children. For Africa, the warning is louder: if we cannot shield our people from predators within and without, can we ever claim to be free? And for the world, especially for the West, the mirror is uncomfortable. Washington can speak of democracy. Brussels can draft human rights reports. But if European technology, Canadian companies, and Israeli implants are found in the hands of traffickers, then justice demands more than words. It demands accountability. My friends, what will we do with this story? Will we let it pass as just another headline buried under the noise of global politics? Or will we remember that 832 people, mothers, fathers, children, walked out of darkness because one nation dared to act? The image of Traoré standing among those rescued children is not a victory pose. It is a warning. Because for every warehouse uncovered, how many more remain hidden? For every child saved, how many more are still waiting in silence? So I ask you directly, do you believe President Ibrahim Traoré's fight for dignity can inspire a new era for Africa, or will the world allow this fire to be smothered by politics and profit? Can we continue to trust him to carry this mission, or should others rise beside him to ensure it never fades? If this story moved you, please share it. Share it in your family chat, in your church group, in your community circle. Let the truth travel faster than lies. Subscribe if you believe that the truth is more important than the headlines. And if you stand with Africa's children, if you believe in a future where no one is sold again, type these 2 words in the comments: Africa Rise. Because this is not just Burkina Faso's story, it is humanity's. And history will ask us, did we look away or did we rise?